Introduce the family. A seemingly normal home. Describe your role as a loving wife, mother, and now grandmother. Emphasize the trust you had in your husband and the life you thought you were building. I want to take you back to a time when I thought everything in my life made sense. I was a wife, a mother, and a woman who believed she'd chosen the right partner. We had a home filled with routines. Morning breakfasts, weekend outings, school pickups, birthday cakes. The kind of life you see in photo albums. The kind people nod and smile at without ever guessing what might be hiding behind the front door. I married young, like many women in my generation. He was charming, responsible, and he said all the right things. He worked hard, provided for us, and never raised his voice in public. If you saw us at the grocery store or at church, you'd think we were just another ordinary couple doing our best. And for a while I believed that too. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. When our daughter was born, I was over the moon. I remember holding her for the first time, so tiny, with a little button nose and those big curious eyes. She changed my world. I loved her fiercely from the very first moment, and I made all those quiet promises that mothers make. I'll protect you. I'll always keep you safe. At the time, I didn't know I was promising something I wouldn't be able to keep. In those early years, everything looked fine on the outside. She laughed. She played. She went to school. My husband would tuck her in at night and say he loved her. And I'd sit there, sipping tea, thinking how lucky we were. I had no reason to question anything. And honestly, I didn't know how to. Abuse wasn't something we talked about. Not in my family. Not in my neighborhood. Not in my generation. We believed in keeping problems inside the home. And that silence became a dangerous habit. Looking back now, I realize how carefully he maintained the illusion of normalcy. He was calculated, measured. He never let the mask slip in front of me. And whenever I felt something was off, maybe the way she flinched when he walked in the room or how quiet she became sometimes, I chalked it up to growing pains or mood swings. Children go through phases, right? That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe, because the alternative was unthinkable. I was blind, but not because I didn't love my daughter. I was blind because I trusted the wrong person with her safety. And that's a truth I've had to carry every single day since. Love can sometimes make us foolish. It can make us deaf to the whispers, blind to the signs, numb to the subtle cries for help. And when you've built a life with someone, shared decades, shared dreams, it's hard to believe they could be capable of something so vile. But evil doesn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wears a wedding ring. Sometimes it makes coffee in the morning and pays the bills on time. I remember family holidays, birthdays, school events. All those smiling photos. I remember brushing my daughter's hair, picking out her clothes, packing her lunches. She trusted me. She trusted that I was keeping her safe. And for a long time I failed her without even knowing it. And that's the most painful part of all. You know, people often ask, how could you not see it? And my answer is never simple. It's not that I didn't see. It's that I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. I didn't know that the quietness, the sudden stomach aches before school, the forced smiles, those weren't just childhood quirks. They were signs. But I was too wrapped up in the image I thought we had, the security I thought we shared. I wasn't looking beneath the surface. We lived in a house of mirrors. Everything looked fine from a distance, but the reflections were warped. And when I finally saw the truth, it shattered everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and family. But before that day came, before the scream, before the confrontation, I lived in a world that felt safe, a world built on lies. I want to say to every parent, every guardian, every grandparent, just because things look okay doesn't mean they are. Just because someone seems trustworthy doesn't mean they deserve your trust. And sometimes the people we think we know the best are the ones hiding the darkest truths. What I know now, I wish I had known then. There were signs. I see them now so clearly, like lights I ignored blinking on a dashboard. But back then they were so easy to dismiss, so small, so quiet, so easy to explain away. That's the thing about abuse. It rarely announces itself with flashing lights or loud declarations. Subtle. It creeps in slowly, disguised as something else. And sometimes you don't see it because you're not ready to. Our daughter was always a sensitive child. Bright, thoughtful but quiet. She kept a lot to herself, and I used to think she was just introverted. I'd say things like, she's just shy, or she likes her own space. I had no idea that space might have been the only place she felt safe. I didn't know she was retreating because someone in our home made her feel unsafe in her own skin. There were moments, so many moments that make my stomach turn now. Like how she used to freeze when my husband walked into the room. Not every time, just now and then. Or how she always insisted on keeping her door locked at night, even when she was very young. I thought she was being overly cautious. She'd say she was afraid of the dark, or of monsters. I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I hadn't brushed it off with a hug and a nightlight. I remember once, she came home from school with a drawing. It was a picture of a little girl in a small box, with big eyes and no mouth. I praised her creativity. I thought it was just an imaginative piece of art. But that drawing was her voice. It was her way of telling me she felt trapped and voiceless. She was screaming on paper, and I didn't hear it. There were the stomach aches before school. So many mornings she'd come to me saying her tummy hurt, or she felt dizzy. Sometimes I let her stay home, thinking maybe she just needed a break. Sometimes I made her go because I didn't want her to fall behind. I never asked what might have been causing that anxiety. I didn't look at what was happening in our own house, under our roof. I assumed school was the problem, or that she was just a little nervous. We all get nervous sometimes, right? But that wasn't it. Her silence wasn't about being shy. Her stomach aches weren't just about nerves. And her drawings weren't just drawings. They were signs. And I missed them. All of them. Because I didn't know. Or maybe, deep down, I didn't want to know. I think part of me couldn't allow the thought to surface, that the man I loved, the man I trusted with my life, could be hurting our daughter. That kind of betrayal is too big to fit into the mind all at once. So, instead I rationalized. I minimized. I did what so many do. I told myself stories to keep the peace. He's tired. She's being dramatic. They just don't get along. All the things we say when we don't want to face something too terrible to name. Even the way he interacted with her. Sometimes overly attentive, sometimes distant. I chalked it up to mood swings or stress. There were days when he'd get irritated with her for no reason. Snap at her over something small. And then there were other times when he seemed too involved, always wanting her around, needing her attention in ways that felt off. But again, I didn't let myself sit with that discomfort long enough to name it. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid. And that's exactly what abusers count on. They count on your doubt, your denial. They rely on the silence that shame and confusion breed. They know how to manipulate appearances. How to act charming in public, how to blend in. They thrive in families that don't talk about uncomfortable truths. And we didn't. We never had hard conversations in our house. We swept things under the rug. We smiled through the cracks. Sometimes I wonder how different things might have been if I just asked the right question at the right time. If I'd said, "Are you okay?" and waited. Really waited. Not filled in the silence with my own assumptions. Not changed the subject to something easier. But I didn't ask. Or when I didn't ask in the right way. And she didn't tell me because she didn't think I could hear her. That's what hurts the most, that she was carrying that pain alone, while I was just a room away. That my own daughter was hurting and I was too wrapped up in keeping everything looking normal to see it. Too focused on the image of our family to protect the heart of it. And the truth is, deep down I think I did feel something. I think my body knew, even when my mind refused to. There's a kind of quiet tension that lives in a house where something's wrong. And once you learn to recognize it, you can't unfeel it. But by then it's often too late. There's a sound I will never forget. Not in this life, not in 1,000 lifetimes. It was the kind of sound that tears through your body and settles in your bones. A scream. My daughter's scream. And I knew in that instant that everything had changed. It was late. I remember that part clearly. The house was quiet, and I was in the kitchen rinsing a teacup. I wasn't even thinking about anything in particular. Just the usual worries, what to make for dinner the next day, whether the laundry had finished. And then I heard it. A scream so raw, so filled with pain it stopped time. My heart leapt out of my chest before my feet even moved. I ran down the hall. Her bedroom door was shut. I was pounding on it, calling her name. No answer. Just sob. Shaking, choking sobs. I don't even remember how I got the door open. I think I kicked it, or maybe the force of my fear just made it give way. But when I stepped inside and saw her curled up in the corner, shaking, trying to cover herself, not hiding from the world but from him, I stopped breathing. And he was there, standing just a few feet away. Silent. Like he'd been caught reaching into the soul of something sacred and didn't know what to do with his own hands. I screamed at him. I pulled her into me, wrapped my arms around her, but she was trembling so hard I could barely hold her. Her voice was hoarse. She couldn't even form words. But she didn't have to. He knew. I knew what he had done. And I knew it wasn't the first time. In that moment, everything fell apart. My marriage, my belief in who he was, my sense of reality. It felt like someone had cut a line straight through my life. And I was suddenly standing on the other side of everything I had ever known. I wanted to go back. Back to the kitchen, back to not knowing, back to believing my family was whole. But there was no going back. There never is. He tried to speak. He said something pathetic and empty. I couldn't hear it. I wasn't listening. My focus was on her. I held her like I was trying to press her back together with my arms. And I remember thinking, I wasn't there. I didn't stop it. I let this happen. That guilt dug into me like claws. I still carry those marks. That night I took her and we left. I didn't care where we were going. I didn't pack anything. I just got in the car and drove. She sat in the back, knees pulled to her chest, eyes blank. I kept looking at her in the rearview mirror, trying not to cry, trying to stay strong. But inside I was breaking open. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I was shaking with rage, with sorrow, with a kind of grief only a mother can know, when you realize the person you trusted most has betrayed your child in the worst possible way. We went to the emergency room. I told them what had happened. I told them everything. And in doing that, I broke a silence that had suffocated our home for years. I watched them take her back for an exam, and I stood there feeling utterly useless. A mother's job is to protect. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? And when we fail, when the danger comes from inside the very home we thought was safe, how do you live with that? The hours that followed are a blur. Police interviews, reports, questions. And then the moment where I had to say his name out loud, to confirm it, to make it real. I think a part of me still wanted to wake up from it all. Still wanted to believe there had been some kind of mistake. But no, there was no mistake. There was only the truth. And it was sitting in the middle of my life like a wrecking ball. That night didn't just expose what he had done. It exposed everything I hadn't done. Every question I hadn't asked, every moment I'd looked away. Every excuse I'd made in my head. I didn't just lose a husband that night. I lost the version of myself that thought love alone could keep a child safe. I lost the illusion that we were fine. I've heard people talk about the moment their life changed. I used to think that was a gradual thing, something that happened in chapters. But no. Sometimes it's one moment, one scream, one locked door. And suddenly you're no longer the person you were 5 minutes ago. You can't ever be that person again. There's a kind of guilt that doesn't have a name. It follows you, quiet and constant like a second skin. I felt it the moment I held my daughter after that night. The weight of everything I hadn't done, the protection I hadn't given, the questions I hadn't asked. And even though I was the one comforting her, I was the one who wanted to fall apart. I kept thinking, how could I not have known? How did I let this happen right in front of me? And then another voice, quieter but more cruel, whispered, you were supposed to protect her. You were her mother. I kept replaying it all. Every look, every word, every moment that suddenly took on new meaning. The time she pulled away from him. The nights she wanted to sleep in my bed for no reason. The way her smile faded in pictures over the years. How could I have missed it? That's what tormented me the most. Not just the fact that he hurt her, but that I, her mother, hadn't seen it coming. I hadn't stopped it. And then came the rage. It crept in slowly at first, like a fire catching the edge of dry grass. I didn't even recognize it at first, not in the middle of the guilt and grief. But as the days passed and the shock wore off, it grew. A deep, hot, choking kind of anger. Not just toward him, but toward myself, toward the silence, toward the world that teaches women to keep their heads down and not stir up trouble. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn it all to the ground. This was my child, my little girl. And he had stolen something from her I could never give back. You don't know what rage feels like until it comes from a place that pure, from love. I wasn't just angry. I was changed. I couldn't look at him again, not even in my mind, without shaking. I couldn't look at myself without asking, what kind of mother lets this happen? And then another part of me emerged. The grandmother. I didn't expect her. But she arrived fast and fierce. Because once my daughter had her own little girl, the pain took on a new shape. I saw her flinch every time the baby cried. I saw her look over her shoulder at shadows that weren't there. I saw her trying so hard to be everything she never had. And I realized the abuse didn't end with her. It was trying to bleed into another generation. That's when I stopped just surviving and started fighting. I stood up for her at every appointment, every police statement, every therapy session. I became the wall between her and anyone who tried to shame her or question her truth. Because she didn't need doubt. She didn't need blame. She needed someone to believe her without hesitation. She needed to hear, "It was not your fault," over and over again until it finally started to stick. And I needed to hear it too. But healing is messy. It doesn't come in a straight line. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Some nights I'd find her sitting in the dark, holding her knees, rocking slightly, lost in her memories. And I'd sit with her. Not trying to fix it, just being there. That's what survivors need, presence. Not pity. Not rushed solutions. Just someone who won't look away. I wish I could say I forgave myself easily. I didn't. I still haven't fully. There are days when I look at old family photos and feel sick. I see a man I thought I loved smiling. I see my daughter beside him, quiet. And I want to go back and pull her out of those moments. I want to shout at myself, "Open your eyes." But time doesn't work like that. All I can do now is stay awake. Is wide open. Heart wide open. For her, for my granddaughter. For every mother who has ever doubted her instincts or let silence make her smaller. There is strength in rage if you learn to hold it carefully. I carry mine like a torch now, not a weapon. It lights the way forward. It helps me speak when others would rather I stay quiet. And believe me, there were people who wanted me to stay quiet. Family members who said, "Are you sure it happened?" Friends who said, "Maybe don't ruin his life before all the facts are out." But facts. His life. What about hers? What about the years she lost, the innocence he stole, the trust shattered beyond repair? Well, I will never be quiet again. Because I was silent once. And it cost my daughter everything. After everything came crashing down, we had to face the world outside our home. And I wasn't prepared for what that really meant. You would think that once the truth came out, once we told the police, once we left him behind, once the damage was laid bare, people would rally around us. That they would say, "We believe you, and we're here for you." Some did. But not enough. It's one thing to survive something horrifying. It's another to survive the aftermath of speaking it aloud. We told the truth. My daughter gave her statement. Gave mine. We answered the hard questions, the humiliating ones. She submitted to exams and interviews. We sat through cold offices with kind strangers asking her to relive her pain over and over again. And then came the courts, the procedures, the delays, the paperwork. It felt like an endless mountain. And every time we thought we'd reached the top, there was more. But we did it. Because the truth mattered. Her story mattered. And she was brave. So incredibly brave. But not everyone wanted to hear it. That's something no one warns you about. The people who turn their backs when the truth makes them uncomfortable. Friends who stopped calling. Family members who said they didn't want to take sides. As if there were sides to take when a child is violated. As if neutrality is noble in the face of cruelty. People I had known for years, people I had trusted, acted like we were the problem. They didn't want the truth to disrupt their version of things. Some said, "He always seemed like such a good man," as if the illusion of his character was more important than the reality of what he'd done. Others whispered behind our backs, dissecting every part of our story, looking for cracks they could point to, as if our pain needed their permission to be real. We became the subject of gossip, scandal, something people talked about in hushed tones over coffee, but didn't ask about directly. The silence became sharp, judgmental. It cut just as deep as the betrayal that came before it. And through it all, my daughter kept trying to heal, trying to breathe. She was already carrying the weight of what he did to her, and now she had to carry the shame that others tried to place on her shoulders. That kind of shame doesn't come from truth. It comes from the people who can't handle it. There were nights she would sit beside me, staring into space and ask, "Why don't they believe me? Why are they defending him?" And I never had a good answer, because I couldn't understand it either. She was the one hurt, and yet somehow she was the one being questioned. It broke my heart again and again in new ways. Not just as a mother, but as a woman who had seen how society treats survivors when their stories make others uncomfortable. We expect them to speak up, but when they do, we cover our ears. We want justice, but not if it means facing the possibility that someone we thought was good is actually a monster. I learned the hard way that justice isn't just about courts and laws. It's also about community. It's about whether people will stand beside you when the truth is ugly and painful. It's about whether they will love you loudly, without doubt or hesitation. Some people did. And I will never forget them. There was one friend, an old neighbor, who showed up at our door with groceries and simply said, "Whatever you need, I'm here." No questions. No hesitation. Just presence. That kind of support is rare, and it meant everything. The therapist. The nurse who held my daughter's hand during her exam. The detective who said, "I believe you," and meant it. They weren't part of our family, but they became part of our healing. Because in the end, healing isn't just about time. It's about truth. About being believed. And about knowing that even when the world turns its back, there are still people who will face the fire with you. We walked through a storm that most people couldn't even imagine. And just when we thought the rain had stopped, society poured down its own kind of cold water on us. Doubt, shame, silence. But we didn't drown. We didn't go under. We rose. I used to believe healing was something clean, something that happened quietly over time, like a wound slowly sealing shut. But I know better now. Healing is not quiet. It's loud. It's messy. Comes in waves. Some days you feel like you're moving forward, and then the next something as simple as a song, a smell, or the way someone looks at you brings it all crashing back. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning how to live with what happened without letting it define you completely. For my daughter, healing started the moment she saw me choose her. Fully, fiercely, and without question. I think about that a lot, how important it was for her to see me finally stand up. To see that no matter how long I had been blind, once I truly saw her pain, I chose to believe it. Chose her. I left him. I broke the cycle. But it didn't end there. Because leaving is only the beginning. We went through months of therapy, both of us. I sat through sessions where she finally spoke the words she had been holding inside for years. And hearing them, those raw, broken pieces of her childhood, I felt shattered all over again. But I stayed. I listened. That's what healing sometimes looks like. Sitting in the most uncomfortable silence and refusing to look away. She had to learn how to trust again. How to look at a man without flinching. How to walk into a room and not feel like a target. That's not something that happens quickly or even fully. But piece by piece she started coming back to herself. Her laughter became real again. Not just something polite or forced. She began to dream again, to talk about the future without fear shadowing every word. And through it all I had to heal too. I had to forgive myself. Not in the way people usually talk about forgiveness. Not in a way that erases the past. No, I had to learn how to hold myself accountable without letting guilt destroy me. That's a hard balance to find. There were nights I cried alone, not because I needed pity, but because I needed to release everything I had been holding inside. The shame, the regret, the anger at myself for not seeing what was right in front of me. But healing also brought moments I never expected. Moments of grace. Like the first time she told me she felt safe again. Or when she held her baby daughter in her arms and said, "She'll never go through what I went through." That's when I knew something had changed. That's when I saw how strength is passed down, not just in genetics but in choices. She was choosing to break the silence for the next generation. I watch her now, and I see someone who has walked through hell and kept walking. She doesn't pretend everything is okay. She doesn't wear masks anymore. She lives with scars, yes, but they aren't her shame. They are her proof. Proof that she survived. Proof that truth, even when ignored or doubted, is still powerful. She's spoken to other survivors. She's written about her journey. She stood in rooms like this one and said things no one should ever have to say out loud. And in doing so, she's created space for others to do the same. That's what healing becomes when it deepens. It turns into something bigger than you. It becomes an invitation to others to speak, to reclaim their stories. And I became a different kind of mother. A more present one. A more honest one. I stopped pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. I started talking openly about the hard things, about pain, about trauma, about survival. Because the silence that once protected the man who hurt her, that silence no longer lives in our family. Now we speak. We ask questions. We listen without judgment. We believe each other. And that has made all the difference. Healing isn't linear. It isn't perfect. And it doesn't mean everything is okay now. There are still hard days. There are still nightmares, still quiet moments where grief sneaks back in. But we face those moments together now. We don't hide from them. I used to wish this had never happened. Course I did. No mother wants to watch her child suffer. But wishing doesn't change the past. What does change it, what transforms it, is the choice to rise anyway. To look at what was broken and say, "We're still here." And we are.